Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. One of our viewers was asking if I could please zone in on different types of profiles of people based on, are you a freelancer, are you an investor, are you a business owner, are you, whatever else, right? A person in the merchant marine or whatever, and to give some specifics based on the needs of that group. And I've done a little bit of this, for example, some videos on traders, and you can go and check those out. I will, therefore, because he was requesting this, do some more specifics on these particular areas. But I'm going to start with this video giving a highlight of, if you're any of those people, how is the picture of where to go and how to set yourselves up different depending on the category that you are in. So I'm going to dive into that right now. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notifications so you don't miss out on any of our videos. If you'd like help with figuring out where to relocate, if you'd like help getting a residency or a citizenship, if you'd like help optimizing your tax for your business or for yourself personally, or getting asset protection, forming companies and opening bank accounts, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net or offshorecapitalist.com. All right, well, let's dive in. So let's start with freelancers, right? So kind of people, let's call them location independent workers. Now, this could be somebody who is an employee for a company, or they could be just subcontracting themselves. The important thing is that they have earned income. And I think the lesson that I'm going to be giving you here based on this is you're essentially planning for different types of income, right? This is earned income. When we're talking about investors, we're talking mostly about capital gains, right? Where you are is kind of less important, like you're not doing the work of making it happen. And then there is business owners where the business is somewhere and you're receiving dividends, okay? So if you're a sole person, a freelancer, employee, etc., you may not have the ability to set up a foreign company, because generally, not always, but generally, to set up a foreign company and benefit from that, you need to actually have the work being done outside of the country that you're in. All right, most parts of the world would consider that you were a permanent establishment, or there was local source income if you were sitting there working. Now, there's some places where they don't police it very well. You can probably get away with it, etc. And so, some people do that. But generally speaking, within the rules, what you're mainly looking at is, how can I optimize for me sitting here working, okay? Now, in that particular case, what you usually want to do is you usually aren't going to benefit a lot from a foreign company anyway. So you're looking at, where can I either have a domestic company or register as a sole trader, etc. And there's a few different options here. I've talked before, and you can look at my video on the simplified regime for Portugal. Pretty good, especially for the first 3 years or so. You can look at something like the situation in Slovenia, where you can get 4% tax. Do some things with that. That's pretty good. These all have limits, right? So it's like 100,000 euros, for example, in Slovenia. So depending on where you are on the income scale. Then you have something like Romania, right? And in Romania, it's a little bit better because you can have up to $1 million, and that's a local company. It's a micro enterprise. And so there's some things you can do there. The other alternative you can do is just move to a place that has low tax. Places like UAE, places like Bulgaria, places like Montenegro, places like that, right? Places that have low tax. Cyprus can give you some good things, in particular if you're working by moving around. That's pretty useful. Okay, so yeah, places in that ballpark, and there's a number of them. Andorra, just depending on what it is that you like. One of the things I always tell people is, there's like the math equation of what's best for you, and then there's the values part of it of what kind of life do you actually want to live. So you can pick accordingly. Once in a while, there's some other special regimes in places like Italy, Greece, Spain, etc. So, we can see. That's that. The second group are investors. And let's separate investors into two groups: active traders and long-term holders, okay? So generally speaking, it's harder to take advantage of for like day traders, because they're generally considered more like the first group, right? So you then need to figure out, okay, well, where can I do this? Now, there are some cases where, like in Cyprus, it tends to be pretty good for traders. Some people will argue that you could be considered working, but under the law, the sale of securities are not taxed and there's no distinction. So, you're pretty solid. Cyprus is a good place for traders. Same thing with some place like UAE. Now, sometimes in the case of traders, it's a little bit easier to use a foreign company, but usually not so much. Now, when you're talking about an investor, maybe you can, right? It just depends on your situation. Here, the difference between being an investor and being, say, a freelancer is that an investor isn't doing the work, right? And as a result, you can either own the assets locally, and if you own the assets locally, then you're going to have the consequences. And so there's some places that don't tax capital gains, right? Places like Singapore, Malaysia, UAE doesn't have any tax, Monaco doesn't have any tax, et cetera, right? So there's some places that you can go. There's a bunch of them that don't tax it or don't tax it on foreign, and you have to be a little bit careful about what is foreign income, what's not, but that's something. The other situation you can sometimes be in is you can invest via a company. So sometimes you might say, all right, well, I'm big enough, I have enough investments that I can justify operating through a company, and I'm not actively doing things, so therefore it's not going to be local source income, and I can have the income flow through that company, and then I can benefit from some favorable tax treatment. So let's use an example of this. Potentially, if you were living in Portugal, maybe you would have a Singapore company. Singapore company can be a good holding company in some cases, right? And the holding company is going to earn its income, etc., and then it can pay out dividends, and those dividends have no withholding tax in Singapore, and they're received tax-free under the NHR in Portugal. So you can get that sort of thing. You also here can really benefit from a lot of these non-DOM remittance-based systems, right? So for instance, if you have something like UK, like Ireland, potentially when you move to New Zealand for a little while, there's something there. There's some things you can do in Thailand. So there's a variety of different places that are pretty reasonable. This brings us to the last one, which is kind of business owners, right? So what's the distinction with business owners? Business owners, they can have some work taking place outside of the country. It's not just them, right? And so in the case of a business owner, yes, you can go to some place that's zero tax or something like that, right? It's always fine to go to a place that's zero tax for any of these people. But you have a different pool because you're typically receiving your income mainly through dividends, right? And if you're receiving your income mainly through dividends, then you have the ability to set up a company in different parts of the world. And sometimes you have to have a holding company in order to make it work. Sometimes you don't have to have a holding company. Sometimes, you want to remit it. Sometimes you don't want to remit it. It depends on the country, right? So, there's a difference between what Malta does and what UK does. There's a difference between what Malaysia does and what Portugal does, etc. So there's a few different options there. But at least in that situation, you're going to be thinking from the standpoint of, okay, I'm going to pick one of these places. I'm going to set up a company abroad. I'm going to have a bunch of operations abroad, right? Maybe I delegate and have employees, etc. And, you go accordingly. Now, one thing that I want to point out as a last item, which I had a call with a client earlier today and we were talking about this. So you could actually have a company in a high tax country and you could be doing work and resident in a low tax country or zero tax country, and you could end up not really having to pay much tax in the high tax country. That's possible in some cases. In fact, in a lot of cases, right? If you're genuinely, hey, the company is largely driven by me, and I'm just, billing it for my wages. Sometimes there's directors, like withholding taxes on directors' fees or technical service fees, things like this. Depends on the country. But you can be in a situation where this is a very viable option for you. So I hope that helps, gives like a little bit of a sense of different ways of thinking about these and a few different ideas I've thrown out. I try on this channel to have lots of different, explain the systems in different countries, so you can go and check those out. I guess another one that we could have talked about was pensioners, right? Pensioners, obviously there's special regimes in places like Portugal, Greece, Italy, etc. And so, if you're in a pensioner situation, that would be a little bit different for you as well, and you can consider things accordingly. So I hope that helps. If you would like any help with these things, or if you have any questions, etc., please reach out to me. You can book a call, again, calendly.com/Michael Rosmer, or Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message to our website. And I'm going to look forward to talking to you guys very soon.